Hey everybody, Art Burns here. Hope you're all doing well today. So I hope that you're handling the emotions that you might be feeling with these very strange and often difficult times that we're living in, and I hope you're doing so in a way that is what we call adaptive, right, as opposed to maladaptive. Especially when it comes to the stress that you might be feeling in your body, right? In the world of stress reduction, there are maladaptive coping mechanisms, which are mechanisms that we have to cope with the feeling of our stress, to give ourselves the feeling of reducing the symptoms of stress in our body, but those things which actually will cause harm to our body in the end, right? Oftentimes, as much harm as the stress itself would cause, right? And these things would include things like alcohol consumption in excess, smoking cigarettes, overeating, workaholism, over caffeinating, these kind of things that will make you feel, as though you're dealing with the stress, make you feel a difference in the physical sensations of the stress, but in the end, they're going to harm you again just as much as the stress would have harmed you, right? So the opposite of these would be adaptive coping mechanisms, right? Adaptive coping mechanisms would include, exercise or hydration or healthy eating or meditation, right? And mindfulness practices. And so the problem is, right, that over 77% of American adults experience chronic stress, meaning they go into the stress response in their body every single day, right? 77% of us. And that's during good times, right? At this point, with everything going on with the isolation and the loneliness and the food shortages and the toilet paper shortages, this figure might be well over 90% at this point, right? And so the problem is that we've all spent our adult lives coming up with these, mechanisms to cope with the stress. And we do the things that feel natural, right? You get that, part of the stress response is your digestive system shuts down. So you get this weird feeling in your stomach. You got to eat, right? You stress eat, right? We've all heard that term, right? Because it's so cliche, because so many of us have developed that as a habit, right? So the thing is that most of us have to learn new ways to adaptively cope with the stress in our body so that we're not going to damage ourselves further, right? And so when we learn in two different ways, right? Both are very necessary and very important, right? The first way we learn is through cognitive learning, right? Things like watching videos, reading books, listening to podcasts, attending classes or seminars, right? You're given information, you digest that information, you process that information, you try to put that information into use, right? And that leads to the second way in which we learn, right? Which uses a completely different circuitry in the brain, right? It's experiential learning, right? It's learning through hands-on practice and repetition. Okay, and because the stress itself in our bodies, the stressors that cause the stress and the stress response in our body, as well as those maladaptive coping mechanisms that most of us engage in, these are all very habitual, right? We've spent your whole life, dealing with the same stressors, the same stress, and coping with it in the same maladaptive way, right? And so it's habit, right? And the best way to reduce replace a habit is through that second level of learning. Now you do have to learn some, you have to be educated on how the practices work, why they work, how to do them and stuff like that. But then the practice of them, right? The repetitious practice of them is really what's going to make the changes for you, right? And so that requires, again, that second sort of way of learning, right? That like kind of, middle brain kind of way of learning, not the cognitive way that you're absorbing information, but the way in which you're just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, right? And if you do the same thing every day for about 30 days to 60 days, you're going to form a new habit, right? And so that is why I talk so much about practice, right? When you talk about mindfulness, it's often, connected to the word practice, because practice is what we need to create habits that will allow us, so that when this very familiar stressor happens to us, we have an automatic response to it, right? That is not maladaptive, right? That is not bad for us, right? And so today and every Friday, I go over a couple of informal practices that you can do to learn, to develop a new habit that is a good, a positive and adaptive way to cope with your stress. All right, and so I'll, as soon as I post it today, I'll drop a comment below so you can link to the podcast. But if you want to just find it, it's called the Mindful Manager Podcast. It's on all the different platforms, and so yeah, and it's really important to these informal practices are really beneficial because they don't add more time onto your busy schedules. They don't require a formal sitting meditation kind of thing. Now that formal sitting meditation is very, very helpful as well, and I go over those on Wednesdays. But on Fridays, I go over the informal stuff that you can do, just how to practice presence and reduce your stress while you're washing dishes, while you're doing the laundry, while you're eating, while you're making coffee, while you're doing whatever, right? And so check that out. And if you have any questions about this, or if you'd like to, maybe talk about some practices that would fit really well into your life, I'd be happy to help you out with that. Okay, just drop a comment below or send me a direct message. I'll be happy to get together with you and talk about that and see what we can figure out. All right, everybody, thanks a lot for listening, and I wish you well. And yeah, I hope you're coping with the stress okay. And I'll be back again on Monday and talk about some more stuff. And thank you again for listening. Bye-bye.